Have you heard about the use of the color coding method as well as the use of mnemonics, which have been proven to be highly effective when studying for computer-based text examination? Come to think of it, we can all agree that computer-based text examination are actually very tough, considering the fact that questions could be asked from in between the lines of what you've read. So how then is it possible for you to remember each and everything you've read in between these lines? It's the human brain which sometimes forgets what it wants to remember and remember what it wants to forget. But don't worry, I'm going to be sharing with you a little study strategies that can not only help you to study better, but as well as retain what you've read for your computer-based text examinations. Hello guys, welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today we'll be sharing an insight on examination tips on the topic how to study and ace your computer-based text examinations. So if you're about to embark on any form of computer-based text examination, most especially if you're a student, this is just the right video for you. In this very video, you're going to be learning about effective study strategies that will help you ace your computer-based text examination. So stick to the very end of this video to learn about this. If you're new to the channel, don't forget to like, don't forget to subscribe, and don't forget to hit on the notification bell to continue to be updated as we posting more topics like this one. Let's get started. Let's start off by giving a little insight on the nature of computer-based text examinations. So CBT examinations are actually typically form of examination format in which the questions are presented on a computer screen. These questions will come in different formats. For example, you have multiple choice questions, you can have true-false questions, you can also have a one in which you get to fill in a short answer. Either way, the nature of the questions on the computer, they are all classified as computer-based text examination questions. So it is always in your own best interest to know the nature of the computer-based text examination questions, as this helps you to study effectively. And most computer-based text examination questions always have a time frame allocated for such exam. This could range from minutes up to hours as determined by the very exam. So now that we've understood the nature of computer-based text examinations, let's go to what we have for today. To study effectively for your computer-based examination, the very first strategy is to create a study plan. As a student, after you must have gathered all the recommended textbooks, the different materials, the different notes that are needed for your computer-based examination, the next step you should take is to create a study plan. First of all, start off by listing out the different courses that are computer-based exams. So after you must have been done listing out these different courses, and then you're going to put the dates for each of these very exams. After you must have been done listing out the different examination courses that are computer-based exams, as well as their dates, the next thing you should do is to prioritize these courses based on the closeness of the dates of the examination day, and as well as the difficulty of these exams. As you're studying for those exams in which the dates are near, you should also be giving a little time to study for those very ones that are far ahead, but then they're actually difficult courses. But then as the examination day draws near, you should focus more on that very particular exam that you have. And the very issue is not about drafting out a study plan. Most people do draft out a study plan. The major issue is sticking to this study plan. Consistency is the key when it comes to study plans. The minutes or the hours you allocate to studying these different courses are all determined by you. But well, if I must recommend, I must say at least 3 hours to your study every day, most especially if you are reading for a computer-based examination. In fact, you could even do 10 hours as the exam draws closer. That's all determined by you. In essence, what I'm trying to say is create a study plan. Arrange the study plan based on the different courses you have computer-based exams on, as well as the dates you have, and then you prioritize it based on the dates of the examination as well as the difficulty of the courses. That way it helps you to actually study better. We move over to the next step on study strategy for computer-based exam. And this brings us to the next point, which is using visual aids. It has been scientifically proven that the brain remembers information that are visually represented or associated with something simpler. This is to say that your visual memory is stronger than your textual memory. That is why oftentimes you tend to remember things you see better than things you actually hear. This visual aid, when applied effectively in studying for computer-based exam, can help you to retain better and faster what you're studying. Visual aids such as diagrams, note-making, mnemonics, and most of all, color coding have proven to be very effective in the study for computer-based exams. Let's start with the first one, diagram. Associating a diagram with the text you're studying for your computer-based examination can provide a two-faced way for you to remember and retain what you've read. Let's take, for example, if I'm studying about the arms of the government, the executive, the judiciary, and the legislature. Associating this text with a triangle can prove effective for me to remember better. By associating the three sides of this triangle with these three different texts, the brain actually remembers it better. So when studying for your CBT examination, you could decide to use any form of diagram, so long as it helps you remember the very text you're reading. We move over to the next on visual aid, which is the use of mnemonics. Mnemonics are actually a form of memory aid that helps you to remember what you've read by associating it with something simpler. Mnemonics entails the use of acronyms, you could use vivid imagery, you could also use rhymes. Let's take for example, to remember some literary devices such as metaphor, alliteration, simile, assonance, personification, you can actually use acronyms such as MAPPers. Each of these individual letters actually represents each of these literary devices. Now, this acronym doesn't necessarily need to be a word, so long as it helps you to remember each of these representation of the literary devices, then it serves. You can actually twist this acronym as much as you want so as to be able to provide a word that you can easily remember. The major thing is for you to remember. So when studying, to remember the list of things, you could actually use acronyms. Acronyms are very, very effective. Associate each of these individual letters with what you're actually trying to point out from your text. That way you get to remember it better. The next on the use of visual aid to study effectively for your CBT examination is the use of note-taking. As you study your textbook or your study materials, always make sure that you have a note beside you. And sometimes there are things that you read on your textbook that you would want to make more research on. You could simply just jot it down on your notes. And make sure that in this note, you create different subheadings. For example, if you're reading about history, you could write events as a subheading. You could write dates as a subheading, different subheading altogether. So that's where you can easily be able to reach out to that very particular thing you're looking for. Note-taking actually helps you to retain and remember what you've read, because sometimes when faced with computer-based questions, you don't actually really remember if you read this particular thing, but then you do remember that you wrote down something like this somewhere in your notes. That way you get to remember it. So go get a note if you don't have one. The next on visual aid to effectively study for your computer-based exam is the use of color coding. Color coding actually involves a situation where you highlight the key terms or concepts in between the lines of your study materials. Remember, I mentioned earlier that for computer-based exam, questions could come from in between the lines of your study material. So color coding actually entails the use of color or different colors as determined by you to actually highlight the key terms and key concepts in between these lines of what you're reading. Let me give you a very good example based on this paragraph. CBT exams can be very easy if you know these right steps. To do well in the CBT exam, study the material thoroughly, practice with sample questions, and review key concepts. Rest well before the test to ensure you are alert. Imagine if this is an extract from your study material. Now, there are some important key terms that you should know from this very extract. The very first one is study. The second is practice. The third is review. And then the fourth is rest. You can see how I pointed out the key terms in this passage using the color red. Now, you could use different colors as it suits you, but always make sure that you use less color so that you don't get confused as you read. You could use two different colors, one to show the important key terms, and then the second to show the secondary key terms to know. The interesting thing about using color coding is that a day before your examination, probably you're exhausted, but then you could simply just pick up this text and then you read this text based on the key information or the key term it was have pointed out using these colors. And when faced with exam question that involves that very key term you highlighted, let me tell you, the brain is definitely going to remember. For studying, I recommend that the highest you use about maybe 2 to 3 colors to point out the different points. And while you're carrying out your study using this different visual aid, there is something very, very, very important you have to do. And this brings us to the third strategy, which is practice questions. If you're a student about to take a computer-based exam on a particular course, make sure that you have the right past questions on that very course. Sometimes the question on a particular course has already been exhausted. This is because these same questions are being set every year, even before you get to take that very computer-based exam. So what the lecturer could possibly do is just to handpick from the past questions and then just push it out there to you. Or even they could decide to just rephrase that very past question and just put it out there. So when studying, always make sure that you have the past question beside you. And as you have this past question beside you, always make sure that you use the same time frame that is applicable as to when you'll be writing the exam. That way you get to know if you can effectively manage the pressure. What I mean by this is that as you're studying and going through this past question, that you should actually set a timer that is applicable as to when you'll be writing that very exam. And always try as much as possible to beat that time. So that way you fully know that, yes, you can effectively manage your time for that very particular exam. I have actually sat for some computer-based exam just by relying mainly on the past questions. So if you're studying for that very particular course and you don't have the past question right beside you, well, go get one. This brings us to the very end of this video on how to study effectively and ace your computer-based exam. Now, while there are several study strategies as mentioned under the visual aid, you could actually adopt the very one that works for you. It's not a must that you get to use everything. Just work with what works for you. And if you don't know what works for you, try out the different study strategies as mentioned, and then you find out whichever one that works for you. I believe with this knowledge, you're ready to conquer your computer-based examination. Don't forget to like, don't forget to subscribe, and don't forget to hit on the notification bell to continue to be updated as we're going to be posting more videos like this very one on examination tip. Thank you.